These are powerful, transformative compounds that can work on your mental well being, your physical well being.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of a Come and Clean podcast. This is your host, Peter O. Estevez. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode. Today, we have Zappy Zapolin. Zappy is an incredible psychedelic concierge. He's an entrepreneur. He is the director of the award-winning The Reality of Truth and Lamar Odom's documentary, Reborn. Hello, Zappy, and welcome to Come and Clean podcast.
Great to be here. I'm excited. I love your energy, always have, and happy to be here with you in this connection.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And likewise. You know, we are living in very interesting times. You and I were talking before we hit the record button about what's happening in the world and the connectivity that we are having and experiences as human beings. It's almost as if all the boundaries have been broken and there is no borders, right? We are not, there's no 6 degrees of separation. We're literally walking shoulder to shoulder. With that in mind, Zappy, you have been a psychedelic concierge. And psychedelics is something that is kind of mystical. It's something that we have known that has been available for very unique individuals, for lack of a better word, mostly very creatives, people that are out there on the edge of learning about themselves and their connectivity to consciousness or to a higher level of consciousness. But now we see that it's almost becoming, or there's an opportunity to open the floodgates for it to become mainstream and available to the average individual. So with that in mind, tell us first, what are psychedelics and what is a psychedelic experience?
Yeah. So, it's so interesting because I think a lot of what has happened over time is that we've had this adjustment in words and language and semantics and things like that. And I think, a psychedelic compound is something that can, has a psychoactive effect on the brain. But at the same time, what we're realizing is it's not quite that localized, and it's really, from a standpoint of wording, it's not a drug anymore. These aren't psychedelic drugs. These are medicines. And when you get even more, refined than that, you say, everything around us is just energy. So these psychedelic plants or these psychedelic compounds are just energies, just like sugar has a certain frequency. You put the sugar in your body and you get some type of frequency. You synthesize that with yours. You might feel good. You might have energy from the sugar. And, you put some meat inside of you, you're going to have to synthesize that meat energy out of you. And so these plant medicines, for the most part, this is where they're derived from, is from nature, is you take these compounds, you put that frequency inside of you, and then you synthesize that. And what these psychedelics seem to do is really to, in my mind, to take off some of the filters that we as humans naturally have in our scanning devices, because humans are basically just a scanning device, just scanning for danger, scanning for food, just scanning. And so we have these filters that we've put are on our consciousness. And when you take a psychedelic compound, part of what that does is it takes some of those filters off. And that's why a lot of times people, let's say they use, something like marijuana, and they, use it, and then they go, oh, you know what? Some maybe 100 filters come off, and they say, oh, the music sounds so good. The colors are so beautiful, because those filters that we've naturally have on have been lifted. And the reason for the filters are, just for you and I to have this conversation right now, we have to filter out a lot of things that are happening. There's radio waves and light waves and sound waves coming through. When I'm speaking to you, Peter, there's, sound waves coming out of out of my mouth. You see them, but you filter them out as not necessary. And when somebody, let's say, blows a dog whistle, you do hear it, but you filter out as unnecessary spectrum so that you can carry on with your normal human, uh, you know, reality. So like I said, maybe marijuana takes 100 filters off. Maybe a plant medicine like ayahuasca that's been used for millennia in the jungle, that might take 1,000 filters off. Now you have more access to an expanded field. And there are even some compounds like ketamine that I want to tell you a little bit about at some point, ibogaine, these powerful psychedelic compounds that quite literally maybe take all your filters off. Now you're seeing the connection between everything. You're seeing the sound waves, and you can see, and this is the beauty of psychedelics, is you can see, and this happened to me in my first psychedelic experience, which is why it was so profound to me when I was younger, was I saw that my hand was just, trillions of atoms spinning at a certain frequency, vibrating at a certain frequency. And then I looked at my friend sitting there, and he was the same atoms. He was just vibrating at a slightly different frequency than me. And I looked at the table, and that was the same atoms, just different frequency. And I realized, my God, like everything, even the air in between us was a certain frequency vibration. And I was like, oh my God, like we're all connected. We are one. And, when I came out of that experience, I never could unsee that. And so I always like felt that connection. I was like, I feel so blessed to have had an experience, just even if it was for, 1 minute or 1 hour, that I could see that we're all connected and everything is basically just frequency.
Wow, how incredible that experience. But so you were having a conscious transformation is what you were experiencing.
Yes, I was. There's a few parts to a conscious transformation. I mean, I think, some of these things, it's like we have this antenna. Our brain is like a supercomputer, and it's got an antenna that's reading all kinds of signals. And when you take these psychedelic compounds, it's like you're expanding the amount of field that you can get into that antenna. So it's like if you had a TV and you just have those rabbit ears like they used to have the antennas, and then you're getting 10 channels, and then you put the cable in, now you just expanded to 500 channels. And that's what happens in this process. The conscious transformation, and I'll talk a little bit more about my Lamar Odom movie at some point, but in that movie I created a formula for Lamar, which was basically, in his case, it was ketamine plus plant medicine plus a daily practice like meditation or breathing. That equals a conscious transformation.
Wow.
You probably have to do, a few of those things, because after you have a psychedelic experience, if you can use something like meditation or breathing or exercise or chanting to get yourself back to that present moment awareness state where you get in these experiences where time just stops, and there's no noisy monkey chatter. It's just you're in present moment awareness. And quite literally 1,000 lifetimes can happen in that 1 hour that you're in that experience. And for me, it's really important to tap back into that. I think that's what meditation's all about for people. It's like, how do you get to that present moment awareness where everything is still? And it takes people, sometimes 30 years sitting in a cave meditating to get there. And these compounds that are available to us that have been used for millennium by societies can take us into that present moment awareness in in a moment. And that's something that I think we all need right now, where life is going so fast, technology's coming at us so fast, people can't even go and take a breath. And that, when you find yourself in a place where you can't even take a breath, you need some kind of a catalyst to break you through. It's not enough to say to people, hey, just sit down and meditate, just deep breathe. People are, they have PTSD, they have fear, they have hereditary patterns that might be in their brain that are running through, maybe trauma or, things from their, heredity. And they have to break those. And it's just too hard to say to somebody, hey, you just came back from Iraq, Afghanistan, just sit down and meditate. That's not realistic. And so we have to use common sense and say, if there are plant medicines, compounds that can break us through so we get to present moment awareness, and then we can return to that with a daily practice. That's, I think, what society really needs right now.
Sappy, there's a couple of things that come out from that. So you alluded that it is actually a medicine, a something else that we can take to enhance ourselves in a society where we already bombarded with a whole bunch of from tobacco to alcohol to coffee to all kinds of stimulants to feel better ourselves, to feel better about ourselves, or feel better about our day, or feel better about the circumstances, or feel better for the moment. Okay. But it seems like psychedelics actually break all the various and bring us to what the world is really like, the part of the world that we're missing out on, the reality that is being shaded by all the illusions that are being created through information, through technology, and through everything that we're bombarded with. So why is it that something like this is not mainstream like alcohol or tobacco or cannabis or something else? Would we operate better as a society?
Yeah, that's a great, really well said. And I'm glad you said that. I mean, there's a few reasons why these psychedelic compounds are not as ubiquitous as they should be in our society. And number one has a lot to do with the timing of when these were really introduced into our Western culture. You know, in the 1950s and 1960s, we when psychedelics started to take hold in society, it was at the same time that the pharmaceutical companies were coming out with their antidepressants, their SSRIs, and they saw huge dollar signs, you know, multi-billion dollar opportunities. And then you had the Vietnam War and some things like that, where the government thought to themselves, "Hey, look, you know, we don't need a bunch of people going around free thinking all the time and, you know, questioning whether this war is just or whether they should be part of it." So in that moment, they said, "Hey, let's lock down these psychedelic compounds." And they said at the time, this is now, you know, it started in 1966 with LSD, and in 1971 they passed the Controlled Substances Act, and they said we need to study these compounds to make sure that they're safe. Which, you know, at the time it made sense. You know, okay, let's study these things. But what really happened was 50 years went by and millions of people took these compounds. Many had incredible benefit. And, you know, we're just in a point now where enough is enough. You know, we know they're safe, we know there's benefit. And we're also not going to sit here, I think, knowing modern science and basic medicine. We're not going to sit here and have people tell us that alcohol is good, tobacco is good, but somehow psilocybin mushroom that could potentially break an addiction or, you know, cause you not to commit suicide, somehow that's not good, and it's not even available to you to save your life. It's not even studyable, and you can't take it or you're going to have trouble. And so I think we just as a society have to, just like we've embraced the internet, we've embraced social media, we've embraced global culture, you know, we have to embrace that we as a society, we know these basic things, and we now know that we're also in a crisis. You know, this, we're in a suicide epidemic, an addiction epidemic, a depression epidemic, and now we're coming out of a pandemic with PTSD. We can't go back to the things that, you know, we thought might work, you know, in the past, like our antidepressants and things like that, talk therapy. It doesn't work in this type of a crisis. So, you know, I actually started a nonprofit called the Mind Army, which is a nonprofit that is fighting for the right to pursue happiness. And we are right now, we are demanding the right to use any compound for mental health immediately. And we want the president to sign an executive order
And
allowing people.
I'm gonna go into that, Sappy, but I don't want to lose the train of thought because I don't want to lose our audience. You said a
Yep.
mouthful in your last comment. I want to go back to the reason why psychedelics are not so widely available or accepted But and you also cite a couple of things that are kind of contradicting. Okay, we're living in a very aware society. Okay, at a very high level state of consciousness. There's more information that we had than ever before. So we are literally in a woke state, right? But at the same
Yeah.
time, we're bombarded by epidemics. Okay, so are those epidemics man-made? Are those constructed by our systems in order to deprive us from the awakeness? It's a question, and I know you may
It's
not
a
have the answer.
really good question. Yeah, I'm going to say for me personally, I don't think that there's some massive conspiracy necessarily to keep these away from people. I think it's a total lack of education. And what we need to do right now is to educate the medical establishment, the government, and society about these benefits because, like I say, you think to yourself, well, if these were so great, wouldn't we know about it already? But let's just think about general nutrition for a moment. Most of the medical establishment, they've taken like 1 week of nutrition in med school. Okay. That should be like, to almost the entire med school should be nutrition. But the medical establishment, they don't really know about it. They don't know about psychedelics. And for that reason, these haven't been part of our, mental health program. And so I think, whenever a very new trend comes, and I've been on the cutting edge of some trends like domain names where I, did quite well, or the cannabis legalization trend, and now psychedelics. And what I find is, with domain names, I used to say to people, Peter, I would say, oh my God, you got to get, your domain name. You're a real estate broker in Miami, get Miami Realty, Miami real estate, all this. And they go, you know what? I don't need it. I have a brochure and most of my, business comes from word of mouth. And I would say, no, I know, but the internet's happening. You got to have this, real estate and blah, blah, blah. And they go, nah, I don't need it. And I was just, I'm so frustrated. But it wasn't that they weren't intelligent and it was just that they didn't have the information and they didn't have the vision for how this was going to fit into society. And so when you're early on something,
What's part of having that vision in your part, being such a forward thinking, such a visionary, was that part of your experience from psychedelics, or was that something innate in you?
It's a good question. I think some of it was somewhat innate in me. I kind of always, was questioning, like, even in school, the teacher would say, do this or do that. And I'd be like, I don't know. That doesn't seem, I think there's a better way. And I wasn't, conditioned to say, well, that's a teacher and they know better and just don't think about it, just do whatever they want. That wasn't part of my constitution. But I think my psychedelic experience, what they opened me up to was that I'm using my five senses and they are reading about 1% of the actual information. There's 99% out of the information that I'm not in touch with. And so how could I really go around making all these decisions based on 1% information? And as the famous saying, they say, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And I always thought about that. I was like, well, if I, hear what I heard, somebody says, oh, Zappy's not doing the right thing or whatever. And I think about that and I go, oh, maybe I'm not, or what, it's just like, I am not going to use my five senses to determine how I see life and how I live my life, because I know in my psychedelic experience just how constrained those senses are.
So we as human beings operate. Our brain has receptors that are connected to the universe. Is that how you see it? Is that a reality? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think our brains are an incredible, beyond a supercomputer. These are the most advanced technology that exists that we, can comprehend in this moment. What I think is happening is that we are using our limited five senses, and we are using a lot of, what we've been, what our physical senses tell us. And so, you know, when people have a near death experience, all of a sudden they've widened their scope. They're just
Yes.
like, oh wow. everything is not what it seems.
What
And
happens right there? What happens right there in that experience? What chemical is inducing to our brain or our bodies? What releases it makes us have that sense of awakeness?
yeah, I don't even think it's necessarily chemical. I think what's really happening is that in that moment, you shut off your five senses and you go into this present moment state. That's why sometimes when an accident's happening, it's like time slows down. It takes so long before you hit that other car, it's like because you go into present moment awareness. You're not, it's like a mother lifting up the car off of her child. She doesn't say, oh, wait a minute, this is a car. It's too heavy for me to lift. I guess I won't lift it. She just goes in present moment awareness and says, I have to lift this. I have to move this. So she just moves it. She doesn't think about gravity and weight and all these things. And so when you get yourself into that present moment awareness, you realize that anything's possible right there. If you realize that you're connected to everyone, then you would say to yourself, oh, I could make more of an effect on Peter thousands of miles away if I do it through this network, through the field, this field that's everywhere. I could affect him better than if I call him up or I yell at him or I send him a note or I, do something in the physical realm. And, you know, right now the science, which is incredible, that's just coming out in like quantum physics and things like that, is that fish don't know that they're swimming in water and humans don't know that they're in plasma. So
Wow.
we're in this
Wow.
plasma field. It's connecting everything. And that's why they've separated molecules, thousands of miles apart, and then they put a little heat on it. And this one reacts the same way as this one thousands of miles away. It doesn't, the distance is nothing. It's connected by plasma. And so it's humbling because you realize that you have to try to control your thoughts. Because if I'm sitting over here 1,000 miles away and I go, oh, I don't like Peter because he said this thing, you're getting that psychic information from me. It's not like, that you're not picking that up. And
Well,
that I think is,
everybody gets it, but not everybody listens to it, right? So everybody
yes,
gets that information, but nobody's in that consistent, persistent state of presence, state of being to be able to receive it. I'm
yeah,
a great believer of that. I'm a great believer that if I'm in the present, operating from a state of a state of flow, I'm able to receive all the signals that are being sent to me from the universe, and I'm able to connect to the things that are important, that I need to be connected to. But if I am on a state of survival, okay, if I am not in the present, if I'm just worried about the water, the bills, the rent, the mortgage, whatever, okay, if I'm not operating, if I'm not detaching myself from the abstract, and I don't become present, then I cannot have that clarity to be able to even have this conversation with you, Zappy. I'm distracted by what's going on out there. But if I am
yes,
operating and I'm able to get that sense of consciousness and to be able to react on my endorphins by several practices that I do on a daily basis, okay, which I call the 5 pillars. And I'm going somewhere with this, okay? I call the 5
yep,
pillars. And the 5 pillars is tending to my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual and financial needs. Okay. And
yep,
when I tend to those, okay, by series of rituals, okay, which is, getting up early, exercising, going for a walk, having direct connection with the universe through walking and being exposed to the daylight, by meditation, by journaling, by reading, by learning, okay, by a series of rituals that I do on a daily basis, I'm able to enhance my level of endorphins, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and I'm able to be here and be present. And I get all the energy that I used to get through when I was living in a state of survival, through alcohol, through drugs, through women, through sex, through whatever was mind altering in order to enable me to give me that high that would then give me a terrible low. Okay. So,
yes,
so so I'm able to tap to a certain part. So if most of us operate on a 1% of what our capabilities are, I maybe operate at a 5. Okay. But how am I able to operate at a higher level? Me coming from addiction background.
Yep.
okay, an addiction
Yep.
background, okay?
Yeah.
How am I able to operate at a higher level? Because I want a higher level of consciousness. I want to elevate to the next state of being. I want to be able
Yes.
to top and have the clarity. And I'm going to go back to, I'm going somewhere with my question. You asked, you asked Dr. Drew in your documentary, The Reality of Truth, you asked him, Drew Pinsky, what he thought about psychedelics. And he didn't want to touch that conversation. He said he didn't know enough. And I know why, because he comes from an addiction recovery background. Okay.
Yeah.
So to do any mind altering, okay, is going almost against the Bible or the principles of addiction, right? Recovery. So let's cut through that myth. Okay. How
Yeah.
safe is it for an addict, for somebody with an issue, to be able to experience microdose NDMT, ayahuasca, okay, psilocybin, whatever it is? How safe is it, and what is the possible end result?
That's a great question. I mean, I want to say in reality, these psychedelic compounds are some of the least addictive compounds on the planet. If somebody, I've done ibogaine, which is the most powerful psychedelic known to man. It's an African root. It's known to break a heroin or a meth addiction in one 12-hour session. If somebody said to me today, Zappy, here's $1 million, you're going to do an iboga journey, I'd be like, no chance, zero chance. Okay, that's how unaddictive these things are. But I think like what's happening is, you even look back to Bill W. from AA. It's a known fact that Bill W. took LSD when he
Absolutely.
was putting together that program, and it was taken out because people were fearful that, oh well, maybe that'll contradict, and oh, we can't have people going out of their minds, they'll just get addicted. That's incorrect information. These are different areas of the brain that these things are acting on. And Timothy Leary made a very powerful paper he wrote called 8 Areas of the Brain, and he described, this is back in the 70s, he described that you have 4 areas of your brain on the left side, which are your survival brain, like your lizard brain. And he said you have 4 areas on your right that are your evolutionary brain. And he said each area can be affected by a compound or a frequency. And he said the fourth area of the brain on the left can be triggered with alcohol. It's going to exacerbate your fear and your all these problematic things on the left hand side. He said on the right hand side, you trigger the fifth one with marijuana, the sixth one with mushrooms, psilocybin, the seventh one with ayahuasca or high dose LSD. And he said the highest level of your brain, the 8th area of your brain that unlocks your supercomputer, you can trigger with ketamine frequency. And so I read that and I was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. And Timothy Leary is a definite, genius guy and an incredible, kind of somebody who really affected consciousness in the way that he did. But for Timothy Leary, and from what I've seen, in order to, things like alcohol and cocaine and these things, it's like their left side, their evolution, their survival brain triggers, and you're really trying to just hide back into that lizard fear mentality. But when you open up your evolutionary brain, and you can see this in an MRI, it's absolutely clear nowadays what's happening and what areas of the brain are in action during these compounds. And if you look at ketamine, for an example, which I think is incredible, it's FDA approved, it's completely safe, doesn't affect your breathing, and it opens up, it brings you into present moment awareness immediately. It wears off very quickly, and it's been shown to affect the areas of the brain that are affected by addiction and depression. It's Cleveland Clinic called ketamine a top 10 medical breakthrough for treatment resistant depression. And what I want to tell you is that, a lot of times people say to me, oh, I'd be comfortable doing, psilocybin mushrooms because it's natural, or ayahuasca, but oh, I don't want to touch LSD or ketamine. Those are unnatural. Those are synthetic. And I tell them, no, LSD is actually just bacteria that grows on a rye seed. They've synthesized it, but that is a naturally occurring compound that grows on a rye seed. And ketamine is a naturally, it's a crystal where you put some salts and some minerals together, you process it, and a new ketamine crystal forms. And this crystal, it's so it's so uniform, this microcrystal, that when you take the ketamine, you have this incredible experience of diving into present moment awareness. And what happens, and I think this is critical for, I've given it to people who are addicted. We've given it to over 30 people at a drug and alcohol addiction center in Fort Lauderdale called Road to Recovery. They have a program that they use cannabis in the program. And we introduced our KetaMD ketamine protocols into their program. The people went through it, and I have testimonials from these people. They're all millennials, and they said, I've been depressed my whole life and I suffer anxiety every minute of every day. They said, I'm sitting here after this treatment. I am not depressed and I have no anxiety.
Wow.
And I'm ready to go out and to live my life. And I just want to tell you, Peter, that the way that ketamine works and some of these psychedelics work, especially ketamine, is that you usually, when you're going to commit suicide, and breaking suicidal ideation is the #1 side effect of ketamine, medical ketamine. And when you're going to kill yourself, you just figure, I either keep doing the same thing I'm doing or I kill myself. Those are my only two choices. When you do the ketamine and you get into the present moment awareness, all of a sudden you see like 10 more option sets open to you.
Wow.
You're just sitting there going, wow. And you see and you go, oh, you know what? I like doing this, which could lead to that, which might lead to that. Like they come out and they're like, I'm not going to kill myself. This is so interesting what I just experienced, that
Wow.
I think I have other options. And I've had people with, bandages on their wrists where they actively tried to commit suicide. They came in for ketamine and they walk out just, a different person. I have an addiction story too that I want to tell you, which is an addiction treatment center owner down here in Florida contacted me a couple years back, and he said, "Hey, a friend of mine, close friend, tried to commit suicide. He took a bunch of pills and alcohol. He wrote the suicide note, and he went into a coma. And when they pulled the plug on the coma, he came back out. And now he's in a really bad place because he can't, he thinks, oh my God, I can't even kill myself right. And now I got to go face my family. It was a bad situation. So the treatment center owner, traditional drug and alcohol rehab, said, come to my place for 45 days. I'm going to try to straighten you out. And so he called me up and he said, Zappy, I know you have a clinic down there with a doctor. Can I please not tell anybody, but can I bring my friend to do these ketamine treatments? I'm going to tell people that he's getting rehab on his knee, but I'm going to bring him to your place for the treatments. The guy came, he did the 6 treatment protocol over 2 weeks, which was developed at Yale University, which is what Cleveland Clinic called a top 10 medical breakthrough. After the first time I gave him the ketamine treatment, the doctor gave it to him. He emerged 45 minutes later. He opened up his eyes and he said, you know what? He goes, I just realized that all that stuff that happened to me, it happened to me. He goes, but it's not me. I'm me.
Wow.
And he goes, oh my, yeah. He was like, I don't even think I have to go back to the treatment center. He's like, I'm going to go because I told my friend I'd stay there for 45 days. He goes, but I'm good. And when he checked out 45 days later, they had a group session with the medical director and the counselors and everybody, and they review everybody's chart. And when he left, they said, if everybody could be like this guy, Pat, this would be the best business in the world.
Wow.
And the only thing they didn't know is that he had these ketamine treatments.
Right.
So that kind of begs the question, like, why aren't they giving these in every single treatment center around the country? And that is the unfortunate reality that a lot of the treatment centers rely on people relapsing and coming back. It's part of their,
It's
their
part of the
whole
business model. It's part of the business model. Let me ask you 2 questions. One of them is there a relationship between spirituality and psychedelics?
That's a great question. I think the answer is absolutely yes. And I'm excited to bring the Lamar movie out really soon as the Lamar Odom Reborn, because I give him a psychedelic intervention. He'd never done any psychedelics before. He had been told, stay away from it. You could go crazy. He'd been told in rehab, avoid all drugs, anything. And so he'd never experienced it. I gave him some ketamine treatments to kind of stabilize him and get him comfortable with going inside. Then I took him down to Mexico to do ibogaine, which is this African root that can break a heroin addiction in one treatment. And he had an incredible transformation. Reconnected with his children, brought his father, who's been on methadone for decades, to come do ketamine treatments. He played professional basketball again, despite having had 12 strokes and 6 heart attacks during his overdose. And these were unthinkable things. And you know, I kept asking him, as I've asked myself and many others, I said, was it spiritual, or was it just, maybe a trick of the brain or whatever? He said, no, this was spiritual. He said, the way I know is that some of the visions that I had, he said, I felt love coming from them.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, yeah, that is the difference between, maybe some kind of a hallucination and spiritual, actual, energy.
Sappy, I wanna dive into your documentary, The Reality of Truth. The Reality of Truth was born out of you reading the Bible, and discovering that in the Bible it clearly states the mama from heaven is described in the Bible. What is mama, and how was that moment for you that opened up just a wide spectrum of what psychedelics are and how they've been used for thousands of years in biblical practices?
Yeah, that's a really thank you for asking that. Yeah, what happened to me was, I'd had a lot of very positive psychedelic experiences. And I was going through what I would call this spiritual midlife crisis, where I did everything society told me to do. Go to school, get a job, make a bunch of money, have a family, you'll be totally fulfilled. And I did all of those things. And then I was like, well, I'm happy, I'm having nice experiences, but I'm not fulfilled. I don't even know what I'm doing here. What's the purpose of all this? And why do I still feel unfulfilled inside? And so I thought to myself, I think I'm going to need to go sit with a shaman in the jungle and try some of these, opportunities where, with the right intent, not as a young person experimenting and having fun, but as somebody, trying to have a conscious
Intentional,
experience.
intentional.
Yeah, intention. I wanted my intent to be there. So I was in that mode of thinking, and I opened up this Bible, and I was just like, let me, I was late night one night. I was really just, interested in seeing what was up. I hadn't checked it out in quite some time. And I open it up and I come to this part where it's talking about this manna from heaven. What is this food that the Israelites, found on the morning dew on the ground, and that, had these, that they were able to eat, that they were able to have these incredible, save their lives and have these experiences. And as I read it, and I read, it's a small round thing that, appears in the morning dew, I was like, that's like what happens with a mushroom. That's not like something loaves of bread fell out of the sky. I was like, well, that makes sense. It's a whole food. It could sustain you. And I knew that some of the mushrooms that grow, where they have livestock, which is what, it said they walked around the wilderness. It didn't say desert. That's a misinterpretation. It says they went around the wilderness with their livestock and the people. And, some of that livestock, the cow dung, that's where these psychedelic mushrooms exist. And they were taking some of those, having this psychedelic experience, communing with God, all these things that I just went, wow. And there was a description that said, if you pick the manna in the morning dew and you leave it in your tent or in your bag, it'll grow worms and get like mushy. And I was like, that's exactly what happens with the mushroom. That's it. And I realized that, wow, like, what if even this essential text that is like the underpinning of a lot of people's reality, what if it's not really based on, bread falling out of the sky, but what if it had some psychedelic effect? So I start looking at all these, other texts and looking at, pictures from, there's a picture that's in the movie of the St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, Italy. And on the one of the paintings on the wall, you see Jesus and his disciples, and behind him, there's these giant mushrooms. And I'm like, wow, like if even how he's holding his hand and everything has some meaning, like what do these giant mushrooms mean? So as I went down that rabbit hole, I had a relationship with Deepak Chopra, and I asked Deepak, what he thought. I thought, oh man, I'm going crazy, like I'm gonna ask Deepak. He may never speak to me again after I ask him this question about mana and mushrooms, but I'm gonna ask him anyways. And I asked him, and he was like silent on the other end of the phone. I was like, Deepak, are you there? And he's like, yeah. He's like, where did you find this? Like, send me the passages. So I sent him the stuff, and he said, let me tell you why this resonates with me. He said, in my Vedic tradition, he said, there's something called soma, which is reported to be a plant that doesn't exist anymore. But they said that the soma was a plant that doesn't come from a seed. And the mushroom is the only plant that doesn't come from a seed. It's
Wow.
spores that just
Wow.
multiply.
Wow.
And so he said, he said, it's the soma is mentioned over 100 times in his Rig Veda, which is like his biblical text. And he's like, it's so clear that this is mushrooms. He's like, but why didn't they just say mushrooms? Well, he's like, maybe people, aren't ready on a surface level to just come to this. Maybe it had to be layered in some veil that at the right time, that science and understanding would make these things available to everybody.
Wow.
And that really was the basis for, not only the Reality Truth movie, but for me to go down to Peru with Michelle Rodriguez, the actress, and some friends, and to sit with a shaman and try this medicine with the right intent. And that was a total life changer for me. Ever since that moment, I could never see anything the same way.
Deepak's quote in that movie, one of his quotes is, break out the hallucination of separation into the reality of truth. That is such a powerful statement. I mean,
Yes.
the reality of truth. Okay. So we are actually being separated, okay, by whatever it is from the reality of the truth. And how powerful.
The illusion of separation. I think that's the number one problem we're having is, and I think that's going to be, through psychedelics and through, this new fourth state of matter being identified as plasma, we're going to see that there is no separation. These atoms that are separating us are, they're right there. They're reality too. There's no separation.
You also had Joel Osteen, who is one of the world's leading religious leaders here in my backyard here in Houston. And you had Dr. Drew Prinsky. I want you to tell me the experience from the religious perspective. How do you feel the questioning religion or questioning or asking questions is deep and profound into integrating psychedelics into biblical terms? How was it received by somebody like Joel Osteen?
It was great. I think like a lot of the times the people like Joel, and I spoke to, even like Ravi Zacharias
Right.
or Marianne Williamson, some really, very religious scholars, but enlightened people. And as you saw in the Reality Truth, I said to Joel, I said, what do you think the manna from heaven was? And he said, he was just so real, that he said to me on the camera, he said, I always been told it was like bread or something, because maybe I heard maybe it was a mushroom or something, and I was like, oh my God, did Joel
that was
say
spontaneous? That was spontaneous?
Yeah, that was totally spontaneous. Nobody had ever said that to me before, but he's so, in tune that he wasn't trying to, come up with what, the best story was. He was, going to the truth. And I think it's been met really well, because I think like what people realize, especially right now, is we're in a crisis. Okay. And if we have the opportunity to solve the suicide epidemic, the addiction, the depression epidemic, PTSD, and we have tools these are not drugs. These are not, things that are recreational. These are powerful, transformative compounds that can work on your mental well-being, your physical well-being. And we as human beings, we just have to, you know, take a step forward. And I think some of these religious folks, they were they were more advanced than, even some of the, man on the streets who were just, who might say, well, yeah, that's great, I don't want to take drugs to get off drugs or something like that, not realizing that, when you take a drug, a man, which is usually what I would consider something made by man, that's been manipulated by man. When you take that, a lot of times you're doing that to try to suppress, your feelings, and close down yourself, so that you don't have to sit in present moment awareness. And so when you take these psychedelic compounds and they open up your awareness in a very gentle way, they open up your awareness. Now that's something that's developed, building your consciousness, building, expanding that consciousness, as opposed to trying to escape from it. And so I thought I was going to get a lot more pushback from the religious community, but
Which is interesting, Zappy. Excuse me for interrupting.
yeah,
I find that interesting because, as you and I well know, religion institutions are shrinking, right? So a higher state of consciousness almost transcends individuals into more of a spiritual being than a religious being, right? So
yes.
to almost admit that there's a higher state of consciousness in true religion, it's almost going against institutional religion, right?
Yes, yes. And this exists in every religion. I grew up Jewish, but not religious. My family, we were Jewish, but we didn't practice and that kind of thing. But I, I'd always heard that there was something called the Kabbalah, which this Kabbalah was like the mystical tradition of Judaism. And every time I ask people about it, they go, "Oh, don't worry, yeah, it's bullshit. Don't listen to that. That's all. Yeah, don't go there. You don't need to. Yeah, focus on this." And I thought, wow, like, why are they trying to keep me away from this spiritual path? And so I started to dig into it, and I realized that there's meditation in there, there's plant medicine, all these things. I'm just like, wow, if somebody had told me this, I would have loved to go on Sundays and commune with people and maybe take a microdose and sing and just like be so in the divine spirit and the spark.
Is that is
That's
that
what religion's supposed to be.
is that possibly the future of religion?
I believe it is. I think they're going to have to convert these churches and temples and mosques into a place where people come. They like it. They did thousands of years ago. We respectfully take these plant medicines and we attain a spiritual level that you can't really attain easily, or sustain that level, like you're where you want to get to in a meditation. It's very difficult. Sometimes you get there in meditation, but you pop right out and you're like, oh, I hit that
Yeah,
spot, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't stay there.
I have
And
only
these
been there. I
compounds
have
let
only
us
been there
stay.
once, Sappy. I have only been in that state. And I've been meditating for 12 years, but I have only really transitioned one time in a state of meditation that as I was coming out of it, I was telling myself, I don't want to come out of this. And it's only been
Right.
one time. I have had
Yes.
incredible meditation experiences, but that deep and profound, like you just said, I don't want to come out. This is what life is about, has only happened to me once. And I can tell you exactly where it happened. Sappy, we're about to wrap it up. There's a couple of things that I want to go into. One, I want to talk about the difference between NDMT, psilocybin, ayahuasca, and magic mushrooms. Okay, and of course, and I've got cotamine. Okay, so tell us, kind of tell us what the menu is of each one of them and the purposes and who are they applicable to.
All right, that's a perfect question. And you know what? I gotten this title of psychedelic concierge, and I think it is the right title because, when you go to a concierge at a hotel, you say, hey, where should I go to dinner? They ask you a series of questions. What kind of food do you like? Do you like wine? Do you want to hear music? Would you like a view? And then they go, oh, you're going to definitely love this place. And so as a psychedelic concierge, what I do is I talk to people about, what traumas they've had in their life, what their intent for doing this is. And when I get that or get a read on that, then I can make a recommendation specifically about what they need to do. And the way I go is that each one of these compounds has a different frequency and a different utility to it. So, for example, uh, if somebody has addiction, I'm probably going to gear them towards iboga, okay, where that's going to break that profile. If somebody is disconnected with nature, I might tell them to do San Pedro, which is a cactus that directly connects you immediately back to nature. If they have issues with the family or their mother, I'm going to connect them to ayahuasca that has a feminine energy to it. It's like getting a hug from your grandmother. If they need joy, they've lost the ability to experience joy, I'm going to probably tell them that they should be microdosing psilocybin mushrooms on a semi-regular basis, because each one of these compounds has this incredible ability, like Timothy Leary said, to connect to these different areas of our evolutionary brain. And so, MDMA, which is coming out as a legal treatment for depression, MAPS, the group is bringing out MDMA. It's a heart connector. It just immediately has this heart connection. LSD in a microdose, incredible for creativity. So they each have their different utility. It's like a different food. It's like saying, okay, I want to, I need to, work something for my digestion. You could take a certain food. If you need something that's going to, make you stronger, you might take something else. It's just, these are frequencies, these are compounds, and we already know what they do and how they do it and how safe they are. I think we just as a society need to start educating the medical community, the government, society. And that's really what I'm hoping that this Lamar Odom movie can do, is to tap pop culture into the fact that, hey, it's okay to talk about mental health. It's okay to, not have the answer and feel weak and need some way to break through your five senses. That's okay. And we need to just start talking about it. And I think, again, pop culture, hopefully Lamar, he can open it up to everybody and just show them through his actions, what these compounds do and how you feel after and how they can affect your life, so that people can, start looking at it as medicine, not drugs.
Tell us a little bit more about your documentary with Lamar Odom. Tell us, Reborn is the title.
Yeah.
When is it coming up? When is it being released? And what can we expect from it?
Yeah, so it's going to be out in a matter of weeks. We've decided to put it directly out on YouTube because, we went to the streaming companies, and, the message of this movie is really for everybody. And we don't want to see it just be people have certain subscriptions to access this information. We want this to get to anybody that needs it, because we are coming out of these epidemics and this pandemic and all that. So we expect it to be out in the next, handful of weeks. If you want to follow me on social media, go to zappyzapolin.com. You can find me on Instagram or YouTube, or zappyzapolin.com, the site, for more information on the exacts. But what happened was, I just want to tell you how it happened, and it's like divine intervention. I was showing my movie, The Reality of Truth, one night at a health clinic down here in Florida. And after the screening, I was doing a Q&A, and somebody came up to me and they said, hey, I'm friends with Lamar Odom, and he's in a tough place right now. I just saw your movie about plant medicine. Do you think he could benefit from it? And would you be willing to talk to him about it? And I was like, wow, yes, please, universe, thank you. And so I got together with Lamar. I realized that, he had a lot of trauma. His mother died of cancer when he was 12 years old. He had a son who died at 6 months old. And, just a lot of unprocessed trauma. It's not that he's a big baby celebrity who's, trying to hide. This is real serious trauma that he's just trying to suppress thinking about. So I said, Lamar, I'm going to, bring you to do ketamine. You're going to go inside your own mind. You're going to get to that present moment state and, work out some of these things. He did it. He came to the doctor's office. He felt great. He came out in the movie. He said he never felt so good in his life as the first time that he came out
Wow.
of that experience.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did it with him a few more times, which is the protocol. And then I said to him, look, Lamar, you're an African-American guy with an addiction profile. I think you need to come down to Mexico and do iboga because it's an African root that can break a major addiction. I go, maybe you're supposed to be having some of this iboga and you've been cut off from it culturally. And he said, makes sense. I got to get this monkey off my back. Let's go. And so I brought him down there. He did the iboga. He came out of it, and 48 hours after this very intense psychedelic experience, he said, Zappy, I feel so good physically and mentally. He said, I think I can make a comeback in professional basketball.
Wow.
Yeah. And we were all like, wow. And his trainer and his bodyguard was with us. And the guy said, take it easy, Lamar. He's like, dude, come on. You'd have to work out 4 hours a day. You can't be smoking marijuana. And Lamar said, look, I know what I got to do. I'm going to do it. And he trained for 6-7 months. And in the movie, you see he makes a comeback in Dubai in a tournament. And he said to me, he says at the end of the movie, he said, you know what? He goes, in doing those psychedelics, I lost my fear of death. And he goes, I'm supposed to be dead. How could I fail now? I know I'm not the same player I was, but I'm not afraid to fail. And I was just like, it felt so good to hear that. And then what happened in that experience as well was you'll hear it in the movie. He saw his son who died 6 months old of infant crib syndrome. And he saw the son and he saw him at the age where he died. Then he sees him grow to be like 8 or 9 years old. Then he sees him grow to be the age that he would be today. And he's like, I got to see my son. He's like, in the end of the movie, he says, I asked him, was this worth doing? He said, yeah. He goes, I'm closer to God and I got to see my little guy again. He's like, that's like, how else could I ever have accomplished that?
Wow.
And
wow.
yeah,
Zappy,
I think he's really going to be a role model.
Wow, that's incredible. Incredible story. Zappy, tell us about your Mind Army project.
Yeah, so the Mind Army is a nonprofit, and I invite everybody to join it because at this point we really have to fight for legalization. It's not fair anymore. I mean, to say just matter of factly alcohol is good, tobacco is good, but these psychedelics are bad and you can't access them.
And MAPS is doing that, right? MAPS is doing lobbying very strongly. Tim Ferriss donates millions of dollars to causes like this. So there's a lot of movements out there besides yours.
Yeah, it's really happening. I just want to see it happen now, not years from now, because they said that during coronavirus, 1 in 4 people, young people between 18 and 24 years old, have contemplated suicide during coronavirus.
30% increase in drug addiction, okay, and suicide since Corona.
Yeah, they say that the Los Angeles suicide hotline is up 8,000% over last year. Okay, we can't go back to the system that got us into this. The famous Einstein quote: "You can't fix any situation with the same consciousness or thinking that got you into it." And so there's not enough talk therapy or antidepressants to do anything about this. They would have worked already and we wouldn't be in this crisis. So we have to take active steps, and MAPS and Tim Ferriss and a lot of people are, they're really hitting it, and putting their reputations on the line for this. But we as a society, we just have to say, okay, 50 years after these things were made illegal, we are in a crisis where we need them. And the Mind Army is petitioning. And this is the great part, is that Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, had a drug and alcohol addiction issue, and he overcame it with ibogaine, same thing that Lamar took, in order to break that addiction. Wow. And so we're going to go to Joe Biden and say, hey, if it's good enough for your son, it's good enough for everybody else. We're not going to, just because you can afford $5,000 or $15,000 or whatever you paid to do it, that's not fair. If we have these compounds, everybody has to have access to these things. And we're not going to sit around and wait for, another 50 years when we're in a crisis of suicide, addiction, depression.
Zappy, my last question. We know for a fact that John Lennon, Steve Jobs, and many other great minds have been openly users of psychedelics. Okay, has that contributed to their success? Has that contributed to their to the level of I don't know what you even call it, intelligence, foresight, brightness, awareness Has that contributed to their success? Has that been a factor, a contributing factor on being able to reach a level not only of success but conscious that most individuals are never able to tap into?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think these are very special people. They had a lot of, ability to tap in and to be a conduit, for music and art and, technology to flow through them. I think that was like a God-given thing. But I think once they got to a certain point in their life where they were like, where they felt strong enough about who they were themselves. And they said, hey, I have all this success, I have all this intelligence and money and fame and everything, but I need to go deeper. There's something deeper in me that I'm looking for. And you saw, both of those guys have explored meditation. John Lennon went with the Maharishi,
Yeah.
so they were exploring. They were big enough minds to say,
They were
okay, my
seekers.
mind, yeah, exactly. They're seekers. And I think the psychedelics, if you ask either one of them, they would say that that was, beyond profound in their life because it allowed them to access, even more of their capabilities and to, just for anybody, I don't care if you're the president of the United States or you're an individual, homeless on the street. If you get yourself into a present moment awareness, it's going to change everything. And you're going to have a different perception of reality and you're going to be able to go forth into your life because I want to make this important point, Peter. Not only is it important to be in the right set and setting, the right headspace and with the right people when you do these things, but the point of them, just like meditation, is not what happens when you're in there. It's what happens when you come back into your life and you
Yeah.
carry that forward into your relationships and everything,
I,
that you get the benefit.
Absolutely, it becomes a lifestyle, right? It's
Yeah.
not a hit, it's not a rush, it's not a high, it's a lifestyle. You transcend into a different state of behavior, not just being but behavior. And I think most of us are looking for a different state of being, and then we get there but we don't apply the behavior factor that goes along with the being. Okay, so it's
Yeah.
also state of behavior. Let me this is the last question, we're going to wrap it up. There's a big movement, and you and I have seen it in Clubhouse, for example, manifestation. There's a secret. And I had, many of the great people from the Secrets are personal friends of mine. John DeMartini, John Asseroff, many of those great minds, Steve Kotler, the expert in state of flow. So I am by nature a seeker. Okay. But all these disciplines, rituals, mindsets, and things that we do we as individuals get tapped out? And do we need to alter a different state beyond that? And can microdosing help us do that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, when I saw The Secret, and I thought, wow, that is really powerful. Of course you can manifest anything that you put your intention on, but I always thought to myself, what they need to tell people is that the most important part is to analyze what your intent is. So because if you put up a vision board and you're like, I want a Ferrari and I want this house, and you ask the person, well, why do you want that? And you go, oh, well, so that, I can show that girl in high school how cool I really am. And these people will, think more of me and all that. It's like, well, if that's your intent, you might actually get those things, but it's not going to satisfy you. It's not going to be what you're looking for. You have to make sure that your vision board and the things that you're trying to manifest are in line with what your true intent is. And I think a lot of times if you can just change your intent from whatever desire you have into a desire that you have to receive whatever, into a desire in order to share, that immediately you start to reap those things because it's not about you, it's about you being a conduit to share those things. And so what the microdosing does that's incredible, and usually this is psilocybin mushrooms or LSD, that you're taking 1/10 of a normal dose. So if a normal dose of psilocybin is 1 gram, you're taking 1/10 of a gram. The point of a microdose is that it's subperceptual. You're not having a hallucinogenic experience. You're just having this, it's kind of like homeopathic medicine where you give yourself a tiny little bit of the medicine and it triggers your body's response to know what to do. And so when you take a microdose of these things, it really just opens your body, your mind, your spirit up to be able to do what it naturally can do, but you're triggering that. And you do that, maybe twice a week with a microdose of mushrooms or LSD. And the benefit that you get is that you are more present. And and I found, this is just me personally, but the days that I microdose, I'm very present. Okay. I'm still able to, hang out with my kids and go do work and do everything I do, but I'm very present. But I notice on the days in between, my decision making is very, very clear. And I think we all need that. And I'm hoping, I know psilocybin microdosing, it will eliminate all antidepressants, because every time I take it and everybody that takes it, they all say, you know what? I think this is what people who take antidepressants are trying to feel like. And I go, oh my God, yes, this is what you'd want to feel like. And so, these psilocybin mushrooms, they're growing everywhere in the entire world. Like, if you believe in God, Peter, and I say this even to the religious people, to Joel Osteen, everybody, I say, if you believe in God, all knowing, don't you think they would have put something here to help us to tap into spirituality? Wouldn't that just make sense? And they go,
Absolutely.
yeah, you know what? Yeah, that kind of makes sense. I'm like, well, like, I wouldn't want to get to the pearly gates and stand there and have, whoever's judging be like, didn't you see, like, I put all these things there for you to get in the present moment. Like, what are you doing? You just wasted your whole life. And I don't want to be in some position where I didn't turn my brain on, even though I could have, because I just went along with whatever society said. I wouldn't want to be in a position where I end my life and I never expanded my consciousness. And that's why say anybody watching, just, do the research, see what resonates with you, but take this opportunity where we're in this real crisis, to work on your own mental health in a totally different way and expand that consciousness. Because I think you're going to find that it makes life so much richer. It's not the experience itself. It's like when you come out of it, everything is just more real. It's just more beautiful. It's more miraculous. And I want to say the final thing is, I think, humans have lost this appreciation of how miraculous life is, that we're on this planet that's 93 million miles from the sun, so we can have an atmosphere to breathe. And, we're talking on a cell phone in real time to China. It's like, this is a total miracle. But everybody's like, oh, there's no bush burning, so I wish that would happen. It's like, you're in a miracle. And these psychedelic compounds, they reconnect us to the miracle. And then afterwards, you go back out and things are it's like Einstein said, you're either living in a reality where nothing is a miracle or where everything's a miracle. And I'd rather live in a universe where everything's a miracle.
Everything's a miracle. Zappy Zapolin. Thank you. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.